Hei ja tervetuloa. Se on Maailmankylässä 2025. Tosi siistiä, että olette täällä puhelavalla meidän kanssa.
Lämpimästi tervetuloa munkin puolesta kaikille teille, jotka olette tänään täällä Suvilahdessa paikan päällä ja kaikille siellä streamin toisella puolella, ehkä Imatralla, Tampereella, Berliinissä tai vaikkapa Lontoossa.
Tai Espoossa.
Ihan varmasti Espoossa kanssa meillä on kuuntelijoita. Mä oon toimittaja ja ihmisoikeusaktivisti Sahra Karimi.
Ja mä oon tanssitaiteilija ja koreografi Alen Sambu. Ja me ollaan tämän vuoden puhelavan juontajapari täällä Maailmankylässä festareilla.
Täällä puhelavalla me nähdään ja kuullaan 24 upeata keskustelua ja puheenvuoroa rauhasta. Mukana on muun muassa aktivisteja, toimittajia, politiikkoja, taiteilijoita, tutkijoita, eli kymmeniä oikeudenmukaisemman maailman puolesta puhujia täältä Suomesta ja maailmalta.
Ja festarin tämän vuoden teema on rauha. Mutta mitä rauha oikeastaan tarkoittaa? Usein ajatellaan, että se tarkoittaa vain sodan tai väkivallan poissaoloa, ja se on totta kai erittäin tärkeää, mutta rauha voi olla myös paljon muutakin. Se voi olla arjen rauhaa, lupaa olla oma itsensä, tilaa hengittää ja levätä. Ja tämän festarin aikana me pysähdytään pohtimaan, miten rauhaa voi rakentaa isosti ja pienesti, yhteiskunnassa ja itsessä. Ja ehkä me löydetään siihen yhdessä uusia näkökulmia, toivoa ja toimintaa.
Eli otetaan iisisti, nautitaan kaikista keskusteluista ja ennen kaikkea nautitaan tästä päivästä ja festivaaleista. Alen, arvaa mitä?
No?
Maailmankylässä 2025 alkaa just nyt.
Yes. Ja heti kärkeen me mennään suoraan tämän festarin teeman ytimeen, eli rauhan rakentamiseen tilanteessa, jossa haavat on yhä auki. Tämän puhelavan ensimmäinen vieras on srilankalainen elokuvantekijä ja ihmisoikeuspuolustaja Sherine Xavier. Sri Lanka's long civil war ended in 2009, but true reconciliation and justice remain out of reach. How do you build lasting peace when the wounds of the past are still open? Up next, we'll hear from Sherine Xavier, filmmaker, human rights defender, and the director of the Social Architects in Sri Lanka. As a member of the Tamil numerical minority, she has spent decades fighting for justice and minority rights.
Sherine Xavier will be interviewed by Finnish Sri Lankan journalist and filmmaker Susani Mahadura. Together they will explore how dialogue, cooperation and hope can lay the groundwork for a just and sustainable peace. This discussion will be translated into Finnish sign language. Please welcome Sherine and Susani to the stage. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Dear friends, this is the beginning of one of the most important conversations I have ever had in my whole 10-year career. My name is Susani Mahadura, and I'm a Finnish Sri Lankan journalist and filmmaker. And now I have the honor to speak to a woman I look up to, a woman that fights for peace, human rights, and justice in Sri Lanka, in our country. Please give again a big round of applause for a filmmaker, human rights activist, and the founder of Social Architects, Sherine Xavier.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome to Helsinki and World Village Festival, Sherine. A short intro to what has happened in Sri Lanka. So our country went through a brutal civil war that started in 1983 and it ended in 2009. And the war was mainly a clash between the Sinhalese-dominated Sri Lankan government and the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, so the LTTE insurgent group. The LTTE had hoped to establish a separate state for the Tamil numeric minority in Sri Lanka. The war, dear friends, was really brutal in our land. According to the UN, from 80,000 to 100,000 people died. Some say the death toll is even higher. According to the Sri Lankan government, 7,000 people died. So what's the truth? Of course, the civil war affected the whole country, the whole society, all of the communities living in Sri Lanka. But during the last stages of war, the last months of fighting, especially the Tamil community was deeply affected. Thousands of people were injured and disappeared. So there are still people looking for their family members and trying to understand what happened to them. Sherine, what happened to Sri Lanka? What happened to our country?
Thank you, Susani, and thank you. I would like to thank World Village Festival for inviting me to speak about what happened in Sri Lanka and then about whether there is a possibility for justice in Sri Lanka as well as in the world. And that being said, going back to your question about what happened to our country, I mean, it's also quite important to say that, like, you know, I am from the Tamil community, and then you also have part of your heritage from Sri Lanka, which is also from a Sinhala community. So for both of us to be here, it is also a beginning or a journey that probably that should take place and should have taken place. So what happened in Sri Lanka, and then also in the context of what is happening, because I mean, we are in Finland, what is happening in Ukraine, what is happening in Gaza, and what happened to Sri Lanka 16 years ago or 30 years ago. The war started. I mean, I think it also started way back when we got the independence, and then you can also take this back to the colonialism and what happened, when the colonial powers came into Sri Lanka, where they also divide the communities that once upon a time lived together in peace. So in that context, I mean, one of the most important area for us in the history is how the minority communities were discriminated against in Sri Lanka. And that kind of discrimination is the one that actually gave way to, people, the militants, and the minority communities taking up arms. And that resulted in the brutal war, and then how it ended in 2009. So if I talk about how it ended and then what is happening in the world right now, and especially in the context of Gaza, it was a war that ended without witness. So it was also the people in power made sure, during the last stages of the war, to remove the journalists, to remove the humanitarian actors, so that anything can take place, and then you can do anything. And where, I mean, you talked about, the government saying about 7,000 people died, whereas independent activists, we say that, nearly about 100 to 140,000 people died, which I'm talking about at the last stages, within 4 months when the war ended. So you have disappearances, death, due to the brutality of the war. People were starved, and then you can look at the pictures behind me, how at the end of the war, where they declared no fire zone, and when you declare no fire zone, and then the coordinates are given to those who are bombing and shelling the places, and then immediately people were killed off. So it is, again, I mean, this is where one needs to ask, was there an intent to kill these people or not? I mean, I will leave it, I will not go beyond that, because then I also need to go back to Sri Lanka to live there, and then defend the human rights there. So my whole question right now is about it happened 16 years ago, but there has not been justice. So for us to have peace, I mean, there has to be justice. Peace without justice is not peace.
Exactly, and as you said, the war ended in 2009, and when the war ends, the society needs to start to heal the wounds that are going really deep in the society. But Sherine, where do you see hope right now in Sri Lanka?
I think the hope is, I mean, again, hope comes with peace, and then it's the little victories or little changes that takes place in the society is what there is hope. I mean, you and me sitting down and talking about it is kind of an indicator of hope. And then with the young people, back in Sri Lanka, who want to actually move forward. But, moving forward not by forgetting everything that had happened. Moving forward by recognizing what had happened, and recognizing, that this will never happen again. Recognizing, for the past crimes and atrocities that have taken place, people need justice, and then, peace with justice, and then that's how moving forward. So, like, in that context, I can also talk a little bit about, because in the introduction you talked about what is the kind of work that we do, and what is the impact that we are actually making. It is also with, like, the assistance of the Finnish people. And we work with children, we work with, like, we use legal redress. I mean, we actually, like, promote human rights at the grassroots, so that, and also, like, work against discrimination that has been going on in the country for so long. So hope comes with, like, again, remembering the past and protecting the future. That's what the hope will come from.
Can we give a little applause for Sherine, because she's doing such an important in Sri Lanka, such important work for peace. Sherine, we do adore you. Sherine, 2015 was a turning point for you personally, and you dedicated your life to create a lasting and meaningful peace in Sri Lanka. Of course, you've worked for decades with these topics, but 2015 was something different. Something happened. So explain to us what happened that year. You founded the Social Architects.
Yes. It's quite an important question, like, for me personally in my life as well, because I mean, I'm someone who lived in Sri Lanka, then we were like, forced to leave the country, and then I returned to Sri Lanka, like, to do a bit of work where, like, where my heart kind of brought me back. So in that context, in 2015, and why? Because I mean, I have been working in Sri Lanka on and off since 1995, and what is the big difference? Because from 1995 to 2015, I was predominantly working only with the Tamil community where I belong, and, like, the community that is represented, like, with my ethnicity. So then, like, we were doing human rights violation documenting and all of that. But in 2015, where even in Sri Lanka, there was a little bit of opening to talk about peace and transitional justice. And that time only, like, I also personally, plus, like, the group of people that we were working with, we said, okay, if I only work with the Tamil community where I belong to, then how am I sort of going to talk to them about, like, what is happening to me, what happened to me? I also need to work with the Sinhala community as well as the Muslim population that is, like, living in Sri Lanka. So that's when we also found, I mean, Social Architect was founded a little earlier, but again, like, operationally working in the community in 2015, where, like, reconciliation, where you are, and then also the first time when we started to work, we work with the young people. We wanted to, like, work, because that's where we thought, again, going back to maybe that is where the change can happen. They are the ones who can bring about change. And at that time, we said, okay, let's, like, work with young people to actually, how did you see the war? So we also, like, basically gave a little bit of skill set, like, tailored certain kind of programs where they could write. And then we've published a book called Testimonies of Silent Pain, where all communities, how did the young people under the age of 25 saw how their lives were impacted by the war. And that was sort of, I mean, I will say that was the turning point for me. And then I am so glad that I actually made the decision to work with the community. So there, my perspective also changed a little bit. But again, I will say, like, the discrimination and the atrocities are taking place in Sri Lanka, continue to take place against the minorities, whether it's the Tamil community or the Muslim community, or people who identify, like, you can be sexual minorities or any kind of identity minorities are still facing. So that's the struggle. I think that will go on. And but again, the hope come with the youth, the young people.
And in a way, you already said it, but this conversation for us both, it means quite a lot. And in a way, we can say it's even revolutionary that a Sinhalese backgrounded woman and a Tamil backgrounded woman are having a dialogue about peace in the World Village Festival in Finland. So that is quite impactful. But Sherine, it's a difficult question in the context of Sri Lanka. How do you build real dialogue between communities that were affected by the war to build peace?
Yes, I mean, I think the communities that actually have gone through discrimination, like, I'm saying discrimination on a sort of a larger scale, but I mean, the atrocities and like, on a day-to-day life, at the end of the day, what are we fighting for as minorities or those who have been discriminated against or those, it is like, to live in dignity. At the end of the day, what are we want? We want to live in dignity. So in that context, like, so it's about discussion about the dialogue. It's about living in dignity for all of us. And how is the dialogue that can take place is actually, I mean, people, I mean, I'm using a very strong word because you have been like, sort of taught to hate each other. That is what, I mean, so, no, you don't hate each other, but it's again, there are so many influences that happens, like, for you to dislike the other. So that disliking the other and then the hating the other is what actually, like, for us in the dialogue that we say, why? And also recognizing what had happened and then what happened. Like, you don't kill off people. You don't take away, like, the witness to the atrocities. And also those who have committed crimes against humanity, those who have committed crimes against, I mean, war criminals have to be addressed. And I think that is sort of the foundation for the dialogue. And the other foundation is like recognizing there is discrimination, systemic discrimination, which led to the kind of brutal war that took place in Sri Lanka.
And Sherine, you are also an independent filmmaker, and I respect you quite a lot because you invested in your own film, a documentary about the civil war in Sri Lanka, because you saw that as a powerful tool to also spread the knowledge and kind of dismantle the systemic discrimination. What kind of a tool is filmmaking or art to create peace in Sri Lanka?
So this, I mean, I think it's very, very important. Art will play a role. And I mean, I guess in the past, like, there are a lot of examples as of the role of art in, like, bringing peace. And then for me in Sri Lanka, like, why? I was a human rights activist. I mean, I studied, like, my background was very different. I didn't know how to make a film. All I had was a desire to tell the story. That's all. Because nobody was hearing what I had to say or what the community had to say. You went to every capital in the world, like, trying to sort of negotiate and say, like, please stop what is happening in Sri Lanka. Like, thousands of people are being killed. There is no food coming into Sri Lanka. Like, there was a total embargo during the time of, like, during the end of the war. So this is like, so then I also said, like, this cannot go on. I mean, I actually made the film after the end of the war where I took 4 characters. It's a true based, I mean, it's true story to the point, I mean, where that has been acted out. But it's a docudrama, basically, the film, where actually, like, it's about the people. Again, like, what happened in Sri Lanka was not like a war did not end through peace settlement. War ended purely on the using the military strategy. And I think I would also like to, like, probably say to the Finnish, I mean, public as well, and the citizens of, like, the global, citizens of the globe, whereas military solution, when you have a military solution to, like, any kind of war which actually happens because of there was discrimination, it doesn't end well. It's basically like, you kill away people, all these atrocities happen. And then right now, I mean, it is also, there's a lot of talk in the world. I mean, Sri Lanka is used as a case study. Maybe it's easy to get rid of and, like, and then move on. No, you cannot move on unless otherwise you recognize, like, all these atrocities had taken place. So this is, I mean, that is what I would like to say, like, again, I mean, I just want to bring out, like, the perfect example is what's happening in Gaza. And there is so many similarities. When I see the pictures, every day when a photograph comes out of Gaza, I just go back to live, like, what happened to us in 2009.
Thank you for opening that conversation, because we are witnessing a horrific genocide happening in Gaza right now, and you kind of touched that topic, but what are the parallels between Palestine today and Sri Lanka 16 years ago? Sherine, what would you say? What's the one thing societies around the world can learn about Sri Lanka's past when it comes to human rights and peace?
Yes, I mean, the parallels, I think in my previous sort of, question as well, I have touched upon in the sense, please don't let this continue, what is happening in Gaza in the sense, the total embargo. No, when you, put an embargo and, when you don't provide aid, when you starve the population, it is not the militants are not the ones who are affected. Disproportionately, who are the people who are affected are the civilians, are the mothers, are the children, the innocent bystanders are the ones who are affected. So we cannot sit and watch. I mean, it's basically what, muted, the world community cannot be muted. And I think, in the context of Sri Lanka, when it was happening in 2009, the world community was muted. And I don't want that to, see it now. And then if I can just kind of, spark that right now, I think I would have done something to the humanity. That's what I will say. So the parallel is discrimination, basically, and then it stems from that. So you need to have a political solution, and you don't have to have military solution. That's what I will say.
Thank you, Sherine, for sharing that important information with us. You have been fighting for peace in Sri Lanka for decades. Where do you see progress made? Do you see that the society is changing? In 2022 and 2023, we saw large-scale protests. So in a way, we still see that there are deep wounds that we need to heal there.
Yes, coming back to, where we are right now and what happened, again, when accountability, for example, at the end of the day, that's what I want to, bring about. When accountability for something, it does not take place in a country, then it translates into accountability of the others. I think that is what happened in Sri Lanka, because the community did not pay attention. I mean, I'm talking about the Sri Lankan community did not sort of recognize what happened in 2009, about the accountability and for the past crimes. Then what did the larger government or the apparatus, the system that was in place said, okay, nobody questioned you about, accountability. So then that, non-respect for accountability and, any kind of addressing issues did not happen. And then we fell into this whole thing about the corruption, it's the authoritarianism, basically, creeped into the society. So that authoritarianism, when it affected the majority community also, that's when the majority community rose against the power structure, which happened in 2002. And the people who were governing Sri Lanka, who were glorified as they are the ones who ended the war, basically thrown out. So again, that is where, we had the window of opportunity to bring about change in Sri Lanka. And then, right now we have a new government, completely a new government. It is also very interesting, the new government that is in place was once upon a time, they were a militant group. So again, here you have to, I don't want to talk about it too much because again, as I said, I want to go back to Sri Lanka, but you need to read between line and then basically say, once upon a time, militants that they were actually sort of seen as criminals and then they were sort of prosecuted under Prevention of Terrorism Act. Today, they are the rulers of the country. But at sometimes, I'm not saying that when the militants become the rulers that there is a window of opportunity, no. But they were not the ones, for 30 years, last 30 years, rule the countries. Therefore, they have been given a little bit of power where they don't have a lot of, the baggage. So therefore, there might be an opportunity for them to actually, sort of concentrate on peace and then also put in mechanism where to address the systemic discrimination that had been going on in Sri Lanka for the longest time. So we will see. But, there are times, right now, one of the things that I am very concerned about it, like, yesterday's news was because in Canada, like, because you have a very large Tamil community, and they all advocated to have, because memorialization is very much like, not tolerated in Sri Lanka. So, like, the refugees who were living in Canada, they have come up with this, like, a genocide sort of like, monument. And then Sri Lankan government was very, very unhappy, and then they were very, very against it. And yesterday, like, in the news, our foreign minister had said, if anyone if there was genocide in Sri Lanka, they will be dealt with legally. So again, that can also kind of like, open a whole lot of window for all of us. So we will see, like, but we have to be very careful. But it is not a very good sort of a way that they are going. But I mean, they also have to deal with the majority community as well. So I also want to give a benefit of the doubt here.
So the war ended, but there is, as Sherine said, there is still silencing happening today in Sri Lanka. So that's something that we really need to keep in mind. But Sherine, in short, if you could say, if we can dream a little about a better future, how can Sri Lanka move beyond the trauma of our past to create a society where all people, regardless of their ethnicity or religion or background, can live together in dignity and peace? What needs to happen right now?
It's like, I think one of the basic is like, respect and acceptance of diversity. You have a diverse religion, you have diverse ethnicity, you have diverse political philosophy, all of that. So if we create a system and institutions that respect and support diversity, I think that is one of the way to go. But on the other hand, it's again, politics always divides. And then, like, this the short-term political gain where, like, you work on people's emotions as like, okay, it's my religion, my ethnicity, mine, which actually sort of creating the hierarchy within all this instead of creating, like, respect for diversity is the one that actually creates a lot of problems. So going back to the question that you asked, and what I would like to see in Sri Lanka is very much is creating a sort of an environment where diversity is accepted, and at the same time, the historical presence of different communities. Tamils had been there, Muslims have been there, the Sinhalese have been there. Just because I have, like, higher number of people doesn't mean that I have. So it's the majority politics, and again, like, this is where democracy is also, the numerical sort of the number in democracy can also be questioned. Yeah.
Sherine, time flies. We have 1 minute. Here we are seeing a picture behind us about one of your biggest dreams. Tell us about that, and what's your final message to us Finns? How can we support peace worldwide?
Because I work a lot with, like, the survivors of war, whereas, like, they don't have a space to go. So that is why, like, my dream is to create a garden called Garden of Tears, where mothers of the disappeared, families of those who have lost their family members can come in peace to mourn, to celebrate, to talk about the loved ones they have lost during the 30 years of war. It doesn't mean it is only for one community. All those who have been affected by the war to come for that space. That is what it's called, Garden of Tears. And I would like you all to, like, morally, emotionally, whatever, to support that idea. But the other thing for the Finnish part, like, for the citizens of Finland, my humble request was, like, please raise your voice when there's these kind of atrocities take place. I mean, in whatever way you want. You can put out a statement, you can say, no, it cannot happen, and also do not let, like, a war end without witness. I mean, and then also do not let people starve. Don't let, like, this kind of killing in the name of, like, the narrative. Like, in Sri Lanka, they created a narrative that was completely based on false information, where they were able to do, like, end the war without witness. I think I see a lot of parallels that is happening in the world. So just to be more vigilant and support, and then justice. And at the end of the day, when you're doing, I think with Ukraine, with all these different places, there's going to be peace. So when you are advocating for peace, please make sure that there is security sector reform, all kinds of reforms that you support, so that the peace will be a just peace, not just a peace just we only talk about it, but people who had faced, who had gone through, who had suffered, will actually understand and experience that peace, the just peace. That's all I would like to say, and thank you very much.
Are we
Susani.
gonna use our voices, people? Are we gonna? We are gonna speak for peace. Sherine, thank you. Meeting you was a turning point for me personally, and I'm coming to the Garden of Tears to spend some time with you there and learn from our country.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.